Have you been
Nice.
in Sri Lanka all your time building as an entrepreneur?
Yes. So I was in the US for 16 years. I came back in 2001. I still had my job in IBM research. I was working from home for 4 years before the concept was kind of common.
Mm.
And then I quit IBM to start the company. So yes, entire time I've been in Sri Lanka and I've had multiple immense pressure saying you got to move to the US, and I always said nothing doing. And at the peak of Lanka Software Foundation, Sri Lanka had more engineers contributing to Apache than India.
What?
Because yes, absolute number, which is an impossible statement to make against India, but at that time that was true.
In
Right?
anything.
So I've always had two requests from investors: move back to the US, don't give all the software away free. Absolutely said no to both, and I have no intention of changing my position on that. In Sri Lanka, pretty much all our technical hires have been fresh out of the university. One of the reasons for that is a lot of people in this side of the world have been working in service companies if they have been working here. They work in service companies. A lot of the mindset is you tell me what you want me to do and I will do it and deliver it.
In today's episode, we are joined by Sanjiva, an entrepreneur, a professor, an NGO founder, and an open source pioneer. As a founder and CEO of WSO2, Sanjiva has been at the forefront of redefining enterprise middleware with open source solutions since 2005. Beyond his work at WSO2, he has had a storied career at IBM Research, where he co-authored foundational web services specifications and founded the Lanka Software Foundation to promote open source development in Sri Lanka, which is where he is in today. Sanjiva also mentors students as a part-time professor at the University of Moratuwa. Join us as we explore his very interesting journey to being an entrepreneur and WSO2's pivotal role in shaping the digital economy and their new office in Bangalore, India. Sanjiva, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
So we'll start with a rapid fire and a few fun questions. Um, if you could teach a university course that combines your love for open source and your experience with startups, what would it be called?
Making software to make the world a better place.
Okay, nice.
What's a habit or practice that you picked up during your time at IBM that you still use today?
Open communication, which is the opposite of what IBM had, but I picked it up from IBM. That
Yeah.
don't do that.
Maybe the absence of something teaches you its importance.
Absolutely.
So that's good. What's one Sri Lankan dish that represents your approach to building companies or creating software?
So I've only built one company. Well, actually, tried to build another one that didn't go anywhere. But I would say maybe kottu,
Okay, and
which
what does
is
that consist of?
kottu is basically like think of it as like cut up roti with various vegetables and spices and meat, depending on the kind of kottu it is, and made very spicy. And they chop it up on top of
Okay,
this pan because it's a
okay,
kind of it's a mishmash of things.
nice. So it's a medley of things, a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So you've been a part of a few tech waves. Do you have a process for identifying what trends to bet on? How do you kind of pick out trends?
My approach for doing things is it's not about trying to catch a wave. I have been deeply committed to some set of things, and I've been working on for the last 35 years. And I finished my PhD in 1994, and that was sort of the time when the web and that technology stack was taking off, right? And global communication was happening. I used to run all email to Sri Lanka at the time, but I was never a business guy, and the idea of starting a company never, that whole concept didn't exist for me. I was a researcher, but
Interesting.
uh,
And maybe related to that, what's one truth few people agree with you on?
I would say that you can build a world-class enterprise technology company from this side of the world. Most people, I mean, to this date, I get questions from. I mean, now we are owned by a private equity firm, which is slightly different. But up until that time, I would get questions saying, "When are you moving to the US?"
Have
And
you been
I
in Sri Lanka all your time building as an entrepreneur?
Yes. So I was in the US for 16 years. I came back in 2001. I still had my job in IBM Research. I was working from home for 4 years before the concept was kind of common. And then I quit IBM to start the company. So yes, entire time I've been in Sri Lanka, and I've had multiple, immense pressure saying you got to move to the US, and I always said nothing doing.
Nice. You've done a lot of unique things. One of them is spending time as an Uber driver. What would motivate a CEO of an enterprise software company to do that?
So again, I'm not I didn't start this company to make some money and go and sit at the beach and drink, I don't know, pina colada or whatever the heck you drink. But for me, it was about doing something on a technology side that I really care about in terms of how you do certain kind of things, and we can get into that as we go along. And also really about making the world a better place in many ways. So I do a bunch of things. And one of the things is in Sri Lanka, and I think probably India is similar here as to here, there's a lot of hierarchy in our society. If somebody drives you, the person sits in the back and they look down on the driver.
Correct.
I don't mean that but the general mindset is that the driver is not somebody who's at the same level as the passenger.
Correct.
Right? And I want to break that mindset saying, especially with Uber, it's a gig job, right? So, it's normal people driving other normal people. So, and Uber gives a vehicle to say, we don't need to treat drivers as being second class.
Right.
And anybody can be a driver. That's a message that I'm trying to say. I say, look, just because you drive doesn't mean you're somehow not as good as somebody else.
How long have you been doing it for?
I think I started like 2017. I don't do it very regularly anymore because there was a time when, obviously, after COVID, there was and after 2019, Sri Lanka had that bombing where 250 tourists were killed. So tourism took a nosedive. So obviously, tourism is a big driver of
the economy.
Rented vehicles, so that went to zero. Then COVID, so there was a lot of time when people, people drive to make money to survive, right? I don't drive for that, so I'm not competing for business, so I don't want to drive in that situation. So I backed off, and so I reduced because of that. But yeah, I started in 2017.
Very nice. Can you talk us through your background? It's a very interesting, unique journey, especially for our listeners, given, you're from Sri Lanka, you have a very different worldview and experience. You've studied applied math. How did you get into entrepreneurship and software development?
Okay, so my story is I am born in Sri Lanka. I went to school in Sri Lanka. My parents are middle class people. My father was an army officer and mother was a school teacher. And then after my father retired from the army, he worked in Oman for a while. I went to school in Oman for a short time, Indian Central School in Muscat, Oman. This is in 1980. Then I came back to Sri Lanka, and then in 1984, I actually studied in India for 1 year. I was at the American Embassy School in New Delhi. I had an uncle who was working in WHO. It's kind of an odd story. And he has two sons who was also going to school there. So he had offered to host me there. So somehow I ended up there. And then I went from there to the US, did a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. And I until the 11th grade, I was not working hard in school. 11th, 12th, I was really started working hard, and I was beating everybody. But when I applied to university, at the time I really wanted to go to MIT. Applied to MIT, they didn't accept me. So, and then I had applied to all these sort of smaller schools, and I picked the school based on latitude because I figured it'll be less cold. I'm going from Sri Lanka, right? Then I went to Purdue for grad school, then did a PhD there. I was a postdoc and faculty there for 3 years. Then joined IBM Research in 97, came back to Sri Lanka in 2001, kept my job in IBM. I was working from home from here, had an ISDN line, 56 kbps, and a good minute you had 112 kbps. I don't think anybody these days knows what kbps means, right? Right now I have, I think, a 300 megabit fiber connection at home. So
long journey from there.
Yeah. And before that, even while I was a grad student, I used to help deliver email to Sri Lanka. So all the mail to Sri Lanka used to come to a machine I had at Purdue, and I would download it
Wow.
by in a phone basically, and we would do a modem call every day. And this money was collected from students and various other people. We call every day between 6 and 7 because that's when the MCI, Friends and Family program, kept the price low. Low meant like $3 a minute, right? Not instead of 7. And we would connect at like 1200 baud. And again, most of the people listening wouldn't know what a baud is, but that's okay.
I don't know what that is actually. I mean, I know kbps, but not that.
Yeah. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, and then I started the company in 2005 because when I came back in 2001 to Sri Lanka, I was active in open source. I was doing a lot of work in Apache. I had convinced IBM to open source a bunch of stuff, and I was leading a bunch of those and writing a lot of code. But when I came back, there was a group called LK Lanka Linux user group. And that was like the main, the FOSS kind of group. Open source word was not as popular those days as free software, right? And then later the two terms were merged to free and open source software, FOSS. And but what was apparent was that while in the Apache Software Foundation, they're always short of people to write code and get things done, nobody here was focused on writing any code. Everybody was like, don't use Microsoft, use Red Hat. Don't use Office, use whatever, Open Office, right? But really all that was saying was buy the drug from a different dealer, because you're still addicted. You still have no control over what goes into that drug, the operating system or the application, whatever you're using, right? So the goal was to say, well, why can't we be making those things? And the general mindset was, who the heck are we, right? How can we make this stuff? But then I had been, I was in IBM, 400,000 employees. I was still working for IBM, 400,000 employees. But I knew that despite having 400,000 employees, there were, in any given major technology product that IBM was making $1 billion even at that time, there were only a few people who were the actual drivers, the leaders, the creative people. So, and also from Apache Software Foundation projects, I knew you don't have 300 people writing code on something. It's 10 people, 5 people. It's like those kind of numbers. And we can manufacture those kind of numbers in Sri Lanka. So I managed to convince some people to give 4 free engineers and convince Colombo University to give us a lab. And they also gave us 4 old desktop machines, 386DX. Again, you got to be old enough to know what 386DX means, right? It was an Intel 8386 CPU. The DX was like a kind of double speed or something like that.
Before the Pentium, or?
Oh yeah, way before Pentium. Yeah, Pentium was 5, right? This is the 3 series.
Okay.
This is in 2002, and these were old computers at the time. These were computers they were kind of throwing away. They gave us, and we had a little lab. We would go there and we started working on code, and that's how we got started with LSF. And at the peak of Lanka Software Foundation, Sri Lanka had more engineers contributing to Apache than India.
What?
Because yes, absolute number, which is an impossible statement to make against India. But at that time, that was true.
In anything, I guess.
In anything, because India is obviously a very, very large country, right? On any topic. But at the time, there were no Indian engineers contributing to Apache open source projects. Apache was the number 1 open source platform at that time. Now open source is everywhere, right? There's no like one big dominant player, but at the time Apache was the dominant player, and Sri Lanka was the number 1 contributor outside of the US. More than even most of the European countries. Sri Lanka was the next, not India. And that led to, so then we, at one point I met this Swedish development agency head, SIDA, Swedish International Development Agency. And the guy was going on about something, saying, "Oh, we're trying to help, but we can't." And then I generally tend to speak directly, so I told him off, saying, "You guys are coming here and having all these meetings and talking, but you never actually do anything." He said, "Well, we never get anything interesting to fund." So I said, "Okay, I'll give you a proposal then." And we wrote a proposal. In 2 weeks, we sent a proposal for $100,000 to build a new version of the Apache Access project, and they approved it. And then we hired 4 engineers and 2 more people. These were fresh engineers coming out of university. And so their $100,000 is what build Apache Access 2. This is going back to 2004. And we had a lab where we had like 6 people. Then all of them eventually ended up leaving after the 1 year was finished. They all went. I think couples stayed another year or 2, I can't remember, and did computer science PhDs. And so we have had, I would say at least 100 people who've gone through WSO2 and done PhDs in computer science in the last, 19 years now, right? And probably another 25 to 50 in the process right now.
Did it start as WSO2? That is 2005?
No. So Apache, so the conversion from LSF's project, so LSF was doing this Apache Access 2 project.
Right.
And I was working for IBM Research. I was doing another project inside IBM called the Colombo project. I started it, that's why it was called the Colombo project. I was living in Colombo. It was basically to reinvent the WebSphere stack in a different way.
Right.
And we tried very hard to convince IBM to make a product and take it forward. And WebSphere was making $1 billion at the time for IBM, so they were not interested, which is probably okay for them to have said, sorry, not interested in messing with our $1 billion. And so the only choice was, kind of give up on that and go and just check in some of that ideas to some other project and go do something else. Or if you really want to continue down this path, and then Apache Access 2 was like a next generation of that, basically what we're doing. So to really continue down this path, we had to say, okay, then we'll have to do something about it. So I tried very hard to get companies in Sri Lanka to build a software product company on top of the software. Yeah, I was a research guy. I was not interested in, I was writing papers and filing patents and all that nonsense. And I couldn't get anybody, we met basically all the major software companies. What I thought was software companies, but they were service companies. So I actually didn't understand at the time that it doesn't make sense for a service company to go build a product. They are not geared for it. They are not ready for the investment. They are not ready for, the architecture doesn't work, right? That was my mistake. So obviously nobody was interested. So then one day when we had talked to Virtusa, I think, and on the way back down in the lift, there were three of us in the lift. We were like, why are we telling everybody else to start a company? Why don't we start a company?
Okay.
Right? Then that's how we kind of got started saying, what the hell is a company? So.
Oh, wow. And what year was this?
2004.
2004. Okay. So
in 2004, so after that we started working on it, and then myself and my co-founder Paul Fremantle and another person from IBM who actually later didn't end up joining the company, we met in secret in December 21st, 2004 in London, because we were all working for IBM, right? But it was on our own time, but we were still employed by IBM. And then we have made all these plans about how exactly we're going to, lay this out. Then, of course, 5 days later was the tsunami in Sri Lanka, December 26, 2004. So then I kind of worked on something else. We created another open source project called Sahana, which is a disaster management platform, which is now used worldwide as a disaster management platform. And it had its own software foundation, now Sahana Software Foundation. And in February, I kind of started coming back to, okay, now let's go get this done. And I quit IBM on April 15th, 2004. And we didn't have any money at the time. We actually got commitments of money only like late July and so forth. But somebody had to take the plans, right, to get it started.
And so walk us through those early days, the first few months. How did you go about pitching? And
so here we had an idea, and I, for me, the problem we wanted to solve was reinvent the enterprise middleware architecture. It wasn't just build one product. In the first slide deck, we had like 3 products saying we're going to build these 3 products: an application server, an integration server, and a process server. And we had like another 7 grayed out saying these have to be built. Right. This is, first of all, not the normal thing to do when you build a startup.
Absolutely. You normally want to test something out, do an MVP, do something small.
Yes. No, that was not the intent. It's like we're building a platform. This company is here to build a platform. I'm colorblind, and I'm not like great visual creator in terms of creating slide decks. So we had this really ugly looking slide deck, and we managed to somebody I knew from one of the XML working group that I was in, the XSLT working group, James Clarke. He became our angel investor. I met him. At an event, and I pitched it to him. He said, "Yeah, because he's a technically brilliant guy. He knows a lot about XML and languages and so on." Yeah, okay, this is an interesting thing to do, and he thought I knew what I was talking about. So it was like, yes, he would like to invest. And then we thought he was going to invest $2 million, but we didn't really know what invest meant. Yeah, we thought we were going to raise $2 million to start with, and then we will have enough money to get going. But later we found out that what he meant was $250,000. Then we tried to find various other people. We pitched to so many different people. Everybody we knew that who had some money or had a connection to some money, we went and told the story saying, we're going to build this company. It's going to rewrite the entire enterprise middleware stack, and we're going to give it all away free. It's all going to be 100% open source. And then we're going to sell subscriptions for it. So most people are like, what the hell is that nonsense, right? This is
How did you
2005.
convince people with that? So that was the model, that you do open source software and then sell services.
That was non-negotiable. That was the model, right? And eventually, James has been an open source contributor for a long time. James has written a ton of stuff that's in a lot of people's open source lives. They don't even know about it. So he knew, right? And he knew that there is a way to make a business model out of it. But we couldn't get, for various reasons, other people didn't invest. And eventually, Paul's father invested money. So it's Paul's father and James are the ones who put in money. And then we also put in a little bit of money. James basically told us, if you guys screw this up, you're going to go get a job. But my money is gone down the drain, right? I'm not getting anything back. So you need to put some money so that you also lose something, which is actually a very good point. And so we also had to put some money so that we had to make it, whatever the money we had, we put in. And we managed to get a few more. So we raised $625,000 to start the company. And that's how we got started. And the name also, originally I wanted to call the company Serendipity, because Serendip was a name for Sri Lanka. One of these old names, and Serendipity was like a nice name, but serendipity.com was not available, and so you couldn't. Back in those days, there was no .io, all these other stuff. There was .com, .org, .net, and .gov pretty much, and everything else was country TLDs. So we had to we registered the company as Serendip Systems. It was first registered in Sri Lanka as Serendip Systems Lanka Limited. Lanka Private Limited, and then in the US as Serendip Systems Incorporated. But then the weekend before James was supposed to transfer money, he's like, that name's no good. I need to change the name, otherwise I'm not giving you the money. So we had to change the name. So we spent that weekend, we kind of tried coming up with the names, but I was very keen to have a name that had a meaning behind it, not just some random, set of characters. And so we came up with a name, and then you're coming up with the potential name of the company and checking the .com, .net, .org. Because those are not available, no name, basically. Eventually, we came up with WSO2, which doesn't stand for, but came from Web Services Oxygen. And the O2 is for oxygen. And inside the O, there's a heartbeat sign. That sign is there to represent the support business model. We give stuff away and we support you, life support, basically.
That's interesting.
Sri Lanka is very core to everything you do, it seems.
Sorry?
Sri Lanka is very core to everything you do.
Yes, I mean, I'm from Sri Lanka. I always wanted to come back. I've been working on, I left to go study, but for me, it was, my parents are from Sri Lanka. This is home, and I always wanted to come back. And now I run 3 foundations in addition to WSO2 and do various things, basically.
But talking about WSO2 and the scale that you guys have reached, I mean, it's crazy that I believe it's over 60 million transactions annually and 1 billion identities globally. How do you get to that scale? What does your org look like, and how do you think about that kind of numbers?
So we just crossed in December. We crossed $100 million in ARR. So that was a big milestone. We were very keen to get through that and finally got through that number. And we are on a very aggressive growth path as well, which we believe we can do. Yes, WSO2 is an underlying heartbeat that most people don't know about. So if you're in India, if you register a company, you have used WSO2. If you pay your taxes online, you pay WSO2. If you do something, I don't know exactly what, with railways, you use WSO2. Some of the health systems use WSO2. Some parts of the other organization, UIDAI uses WSO2. And various other parts of India use WSO2. You guys don't know about it, but you probably used it, right? If you went to Dubai and had a Dubai Smart ID UAE pass, that uses WSO2. If you went to Saudi Arabia or you went to Mecca or to Medina, the registration platform uses WSO2. If you took a tube in UK, you ended up touching WSO2. There are so many things we are underneath. That's the company we are. We are basically background heartbeat infrastructure that nobody knows about. In France, like so much of France uses WSO2. Majority of the banks, majority of national infrastructure, all uses our stuff. We're 100% open source. We scale well. We know how to handle, been around. So we're a stable company. And also the purpose of the company was never about do one thing and get out and move on. That's why we don't follow fads. right now the big fight obviously is AI, and we think deeply about what does it mean for AI to impact the kind of stuff we do, and we go figure that out and do that. We don't just put some AI paint on it and say, AI company now.
No, love that. And you spoke a bit about your clients, but you have a wide range of clients from governments to large organizations to UNICEF. How do
To
you,
lots of small organizations as well.
and yeah, so it's a full spectrum. How do you cater to such a large spectrum of customers? And
Yeah. So we have 700 plus paying customers. We estimate we have at least 75,000 non-paying production users. Just guessing by the number of downloads. We don't really know what they do. It's open source, right? We have no idea what they do with it, but we just know how much of Docker pulls to binary downloads to code downloads we get. We have that idea, but beyond that, we don't really know what they do. The way most of our customers are inbound, actually, right? So we have been focused on building a brand around open source enterprise infrastructure technology. And out of the 700 plus paying customers, I would say 90% has come to us. Right? They come and fill our web form saying we are evaluating you or we want to try you out and so forth. Right? We've had military organizations, US government. We have had so many different, very large companies, tiny companies.
And it's all just coming to your website and saying, hey, can we...
Come to your website and say yes. Right? So obviously, get them to come takes a lot of marketing and communication and content writing and analyst relations and events and all this stuff we have to do, right? But those are all things we figured out. I mean, we started the company. So we had the timing was right from that perspective, because in 2005, an open source company was a rebellious company. Because at the time, everything, even Microsoft at the time was basically doing big FUD against open source at that time. Now they are the number one open source contributor in the world. Right? At that time, they were like, this is tough. This stuff is nonsense. Security bugs to all kinds of complaints they were making. Obviously, because they felt threatened by it. Now they've learned that it's not a threat. It's actually quite an asset if you use it intelligently. So that helped for us, because that meant there was a certain audience that was looking for alternatives against the established vendors. When we started, we were going up against Oracle and IBM, basically.
So you said you're going up against Oracle and IBM. Can you help me set the context for what problem were you solving, or what software, ERP software that you're plugging into?
So, Oracle and IBM in 2005 and that era, IBM was the number one enterprise infrastructure software provider, period.
Yeah.
Right? Microsoft was the number one on consumer kind of stuff, but not in the enterprise. They were making a play for the enterprise. Java had won the enterprise. C# was just trying to do something about it. And IBM had the middleware infrastructure. Sun, even though they created Java, didn't have the enterprise products. Right? Sun, by the time they figured out that software was the play, not the hardware, not the Spark machines, it was too late. Right? Sun has went from 200 billion market cap to they sold at 6 billion. So IBM was the number one, and Oracle has always been a very strong middleware company. They, in fact, invented the term middleware. It's kind of funny. I remember reading a research paper in 1989 with the word middleware. And I was thinking, what kind of nonsense word is this, right? Operating systems, you have hardware, and then you have this middleware thing. So then my entire technical life has been in middleware after that. But anyway, so those were the companies that were owning the market at the time. So that also made our story easier, because we are like, okay, those guys, you're paying them millions of dollars, you can use our stuff completely free. And lose the stuff better. Instead of having 200 configuration files, you have one. Instead of requiring this ton of memory, you need this fraction of memory. So we were the agile, smaller, free, and so forth. We had one enterprise customer who said, I had downloaded and installed and written a sample in your product before I was able to finish downloading the IBM product at the time. Right? Of course, now, if you're a big company, you have a gigabit internet connection, so
it doesn't matter.
Anything you download, but at the time, that was the difference, right? So that's how we got started, basically, in terms of why those companies were the competitors. There was no AWS, there was no Microsoft Azure, there was no Microsoft Enterprise, there was no GCP, there was no Apache, Kong, MuleSoft, none of them existed at the time.
And that being said, I mean, a lot has changed over the years for you guys as well. How did you continue to evolve as the space grew, as bigger companies came into it?
Yeah. So, obviously we started in an era of XML and SOAP and WSTAR and all this stuff, WSTL, all these WSTAR specifications, etc. And I was part of creating a bunch of those. But as time went along, the general trend in tech industry is always simplification. When something new comes, it's complicated, it's expensive, it's messy. Then as time goes along, we learn to distill what's the essence of it and create a simpler experience. So now nobody deals with XML and SOAP and so forth. Now it's JSON, HTTP, GraphQL. There's all this other tech that has come along since then, right? So you have, as a tech company, if you want to build a company that can last forever, you can't ever say, oh, we did this thing. We are a company that does this tech, and that's us. Because then eventually you have to become legacy. If you want to make sure you never become legacy, you have to be able to move, right? And the company that has done this best is actually Microsoft, because Microsoft has evolved so much. They are number one infrastructure company in the world now. I mean, AWS is fantastic too, but Microsoft is an amazingly evolved company, right? IBM hasn't done that very well. IBM as a software company is not really grown much from that era.
Why do you think that is? I would love to pick your brains on why do you think Microsoft was able to, IBM did not? I'm sure.
I think it's leadership. So obviously Steve Ballmer gets a lot of rap for saying, he didn't do anything. Satya Nadella gets all the credit. But by the time Satya Nadella got started, Azure was done, O365 was done. So Satya Nadella has done a fantastic job focusing the company and getting all kinds of stuff going. But the foundation of the transformation was built. Microsoft spent 10 years building a new foundation to go from, I don't know whether you guys look too young, but you might remember there was a time when you went to the store and bought Windows.
Yes.
It was in a box.
Yes, Windows 95 I bought.
Windows 95, Windows NT, Office, Oracle, you went and bought a box, right? They went from shipping software in boxes to subscribe and use. There is no software to install anymore. It's a SaaS, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And not many companies, that's a massive transformation. And they successfully used the cash cow they had in the Windows and Office sort of monopoly in all practical purposes to completely transition and not lose the customers. Azure AD is the largest identity management company in the world because the AD was the largest LDAP infrastructure. And everything is in Azure AD. O365 is massive because, go to any legal business or anything, they're using Office, right? Microsoft Office. Google products are fantastic. We are a Google Office user, Google Workplace Suite user, and we're very happy with it. And because, it's absolutely more than enough to format any document that we want. But Word still has an edge when it comes to higher end expectations, right? And that format is like a standard. They were able to guide the company from being a very old kind of company by today's standards to a completely new company. And I don't know whether you remember, AWS tried to make a play in the office space. They had something called AWS Workspace. They had email, they had docs. I think they've taken it down, right? Then they couldn't make it, even though AWS has all this fantastic infrastructure and still does.
There's been quite an evolution, and now Google coming back with the whole thing.
And Google is very competitive, right? GCP platform and Google Workplace Suite. Google Workplace Suite and O365 are head-to-head in every sense, right? Google and
want to come back to WSO2 and some of the stuff that you guys have been up to. India is a relatively new market for you guys, I believe. What opportunities do you see there, and how come the interest now in the office in Bangalore?
We have about 30 customers in India, and interestingly, all of them also, pretty much all of them are inbound or inbound through with our partners as well, right? And we didn't have a sales team in India. We didn't sell; they came to us. So we have I think about 20 people in India now. Our goal is to grow it to about 50 people in the next 1 to 2 years for sure. This year or early next year will be at that number. And we are putting a lot more effort in India. Obviously, India, with its incredible digital public infrastructure effort, is miles ahead of any country when it comes to DPI. And that enables so much digitalization across the country, across enterprise, across SMBs, which requires software like ours. So we are very keen to build on that. And also, I'm a big believer in software independence. That is, when you look at the world, the reason open source has been sort of core to my approach and my thesis is because a open source software means nobody can take it away from you. Right. Now, software is a critical infrastructure. You guys all remember that article Mark Andreessen wrote in 2011 called "Software is Eating the World." Right? Today, software has obviously eaten the world. Now it's AI is eating software. There's all these sort of variations of that. But the point is, no country can run without software. So, as a country which has to, India is a large country. It needs independence in software. You have to use open source software. Otherwise, you're not independent. If you use non-open source software. That is one of the reasons we have a lot of government use in India and countries like India, large-scale governments, because they're very sensitive to this need to be independent when it comes to software. So we want to be supporting that further and be part of that journey and say, just keep supporting this need for independence. And that's why, obviously over the years, so I've always had two requests from investors: move back to the US, don't give all the software away free. And I have absolutely said no to both. And I have no intention of changing my position on that. Right? I will not change my position on that because we have proven that you can build a company like that. And few other companies have built to scale. Red Hat is the best example. SUSE is a great example. I think about $700 million in revenue. There are large companies that have been built with this model, and we are confident we can build a company that can last forever with this model.
It's amazing. Yeah. And talking about that, how have you thought about building out your team? What are some of the things you look for when you are hiring new candidates?
Again, I tend to look long term always. I interview every single person. I'm the last interview of every single person we hire. And I only spend a short time because I can gauge whether the person's value system aligns with us. And the value system has to be about purpose, has to be about wanting to have an impact on the world, on themselves and on the world, and do something that, you get up in the morning on Monday, you don't say, oh God, it's Monday, I got to go to work. It should be, oh man, it's Monday, let's get something going, right? That mindset comes from being motivated by something much deeper than financial return, about having purpose, having something that challenges you, having something that encourages you. So that's what I always look for, first of all, when trying to interview somebody. Like, look, if your only motivation is, I just, tell me what to do, I'll do it, and so forth, that's not going to work. We inside WSO2, I mentioned at the beginning about the, something, you asked me something I learned from IBM. I said, and I gave an example of something I learned not to do from IBM, which was this sort of closed communication. In that, and I'm sure it has evolved, right? That my knowledge of IBM is 20 years old, so no disrespect meant for IBM. It's a great company. But at the time, if you were invited for the meeting, you were in the loop. If you're not invited, you're not in the loop. That's it, right? So our model was always every single email goes to every single person. So when you first join WSO2, you could get 1,000 emails.
It must be overwhelming. You have no context.
So spend the next 3 hours figuring out how to filter stuff out. So now we put another option where all the emails are available. You have to go and say, select the ones you want to subscribe to, right? But they're all the lists are available publicly. You can select what you want. And the goal of all of that is to get people to want to fight for creating the right thing and consistently doing the right thing and evolving to do the right thing. Because if you keep people closed off saying, no, you don't need to know this. This is not your business, right? Then you shut off and say, I don't need to know this, I guess. I don't care. So I no longer care about the bigger picture. Right? We fight very hard inside the company when we have a technical debate. It's violent argument, but we're arguing ideas, not with the people. Right? So the fight is against ideas. So you and I might have a massive argument, but we are fighting for an idea I believe in right now and for an idea you believe in right now. I'm not fighting with you. And so, maybe one of us, quote unquote, wins that argument, but it's not really one of us wins it, it's one of our views wins it. And then later on, most of the time, every idea you fight for tends to be wrong later. That's the way it works, right? Things change. So then you don't remember that and say, aha, that guy won, this guy lost. That was another thing I learned from IBM, because their model was, oh, that guy was the one who ran that project. He's a loser because he killed that project. and then you finish. You better leave because you'll never go anywhere in that company. Right? We don't want that behavior. So all of that comes to the kind of people, because I'm sorry, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but the answer is the kind of people we want to hire are people who are interested in making themselves a global player in whatever the work you do, and are willing to work hard for it. Working in WSO2 is not easy. I work hard. I expect others to work hard. You can't build a great company that lasts a long time and so forth without working hard. It's just fundamentally impossible to say, I'll have a nice, cushy life and everything will work. It just doesn't work. So you have to be able to work hard. But at the same time, we are very, very flexible. If I'm expecting people to work hard, I have to, in return, give flexibility. Because everybody has life to deal with. And when life needs come, they go first. Right? So those are the trade-offs we look for, and we try to find people who are obviously skilled in what they do and whatever the function they're joining for, they got to know their job, right? You can't. But also another important thing is in Sri Lanka, pretty much all our technical hires have been fresh out of the university. And one of the reasons for that is a lot of people in this side of the world have been working in service companies, if they have been working here. And they're working in service companies, a lot of the mindset is you tell me what you want me to do and I will do it and deliver it. In WSO2, the mindset has to be, why can't we build that thing, right? Whatever the problem there is, why can't we build it? What's the problem? Let's go break it down and build it. If someone in California can build it, someone in London can build it, someone in Bangalore can build it, or Sydney can build it, why can't we build it in Colombo? Or in Bangalore or Mumbai or wherever, right? That mindset has to be challenged constantly every day.
So it's an open source company and an open organization also.
Yes, it's open by default in every aspect, right?
Yes.
We have a SaaS stuff as well, but we're working on various bits of open source for that. Mm-hmm. Open by default it's open architecture. We don't try to lock you in. Open standards, interoperability standards, open source, open communication, open collaboration, open culture. Everything has to be open. Open by default for everything.
Is there a downside to that?
Of course. You can get overwhelmed, right?
Right.
It's not so easy. It's like, what do you mean I have to keep an eye on other stuff? You don't have to keep an eye on anything else, but you have to learn. So for example, we have a mailing list called strategy. We have another mailing list called architecture. So the architecture mailing list, I'll talk in technical terms, because that's where I spend most of my time. In the architecture mailing list, there are maybe 700 people in the list. So somebody new coming into the company, in a typical person joining, we are a 760 people, 750 some people company right now, and another 50 to 100 interns at a given time. So let's say 800 plus people. Most people are scared to send an email to 800 people. He's like, 800 people are going to read my mail? You must be joking. I'm going to send it to 10, right?
Right.
So the reality, of course, is not all 800 are going to read your mail. I find it hard to get all 800 people to read any damn mail I send, right? Because, if it's a salary increase or something financial, a lot of people read it, right? Let's be honest. But otherwise, it's very hard to get them to read it. So first thing you have to learn is, not everybody's paying attention. So that's okay. That's the reality in life. But it's still scary for people that you have this platform to communicate across the entire company. People are in 18 countries. And we have, so out of the 750 full-time employees, 80% in Sri Lanka, 20% outside the country right now. And that has evolved. It was 5 years ago, it was like 90+% in Colombo. Right? Before that, it was like 95% in Colombo. So we're slowly becoming more international. And India is obviously the next big place that we will be having a footprint in.
Very interesting. And can you talk about your capital journey, fundraising? Yeah. Who did you raise from first? Now, there's private equity on the company.
Sure.
How does that work?
Yeah. So as I said, we raised angel money to get the company started. That was based on, professional credibility, personal credibility, known people, right? That's what angel means. To me, angel means somebody who trusts you, not the idea. They trust that you're going to put all you got to make it work, and don't really care, don't maybe not even understand the idea, they can't bet on it based on saying, here's some formulas that show that it's going to work, right? So that was 2005 August. Then we, in our absolute brilliance, we had a spreadsheet that said by December we'll be profitable. We had no idea how to sell anything or how people would buy or anything, but we thought that was going to work. It was pretty clear by about November that by December we're not going to be profitable and we're going to run out of money. So we started saying, okay, we need to raise money. And we had no idea how to raise money. So we found some YouTube videos and stuff like that saying, you need to have a slide deck. And then we had met one guy who was working in another company. And so he seemed to know what he was doing. He was in some other company in the Valley. And we were, the place to raise money at the time was Silicon Valley, right? There was no India-based product investor setup was not there in 2005. And certainly Sri Lanka had absolutely nothing that could rely on for getting any kind of meaningful money. So we started this process and we made a slide deck, got feedback on what it should be, and then started reaching out to all kinds of VCs. So I have all these spreadsheets of tracking every VC that we were talking to. So first, there would be like a teleconference, not video, right? This is 2006 now. Audio conference, and then you have to go there. So I live in Sri Lanka, so I had to go there. So I would go and try to pack up as many meetings as possible. So my worst case was I did 3 red eyes back to back for meetings. One was I was in California all day, did some meetings, then flew to Boston, did some meetings, flew to London, did some meetings, then flew back to Colombo. And it's all economy, right? We had no money, so we were like, there was no question of flying business class till, I don't know, for like 6, 7, 8 years, and nobody ever flew business class. And basically every single person in 2006 said no. Actually, 2 answers, either no or just no response. The good guys said no. The other people just they ghost you. That's it. You send email, no response. And there were 2 reasons. One, basically 2 reasons I said, Sri Lanka, where the hell is that? And when are you coming back here? And open source, what is that? And what do you mean you give everything away? Those are 2 things, right? Both were like, strike 1 and strike 2, both had like cut your neck off strikes, basically, right? Luckily, we were very, very lucky. I was on the OSI open source initiative, which is the standards, kind of the governing body for open source. I had been on the board of that for a while, and there was another board member there was working in Intel, and that lady introduced me to somebody from Intel Capital, Pradeep Plagari. Pradeep was an Indian origin person who was in Intel Capital. He had invested in a company called JBoss, which was an app server, open source app server, which also had a bit of a crazy founder like me. He was a much more technically brilliant physicist kind of guy. I was, right? And he was looking for a company from this side of the world to build a product company. So we got lucky. The first meeting I had with him, I still remember we were sitting in this restaurant in Palo Alto, and I had learned when you go for a lunch meeting with an investor or somebody, you order things that is very easy to eat. You never order like a burger or something, because otherwise, like you're trying to eat this stuff while talking, right? So I ordered some salad or something, and I hate salads at the time.
Great hack for founders.
Yes. You must never order something that's hard to eat. It must be very simple to eat, because otherwise you can't eat and communicate. And so. And he had decided in the first 5 minutes that he was going to fund this. Of course, he didn't tell me, right? And then we had to go up, his hierarchy. We had to convince everybody else. I had to go and do all kinds of stuff, and finally managed to get $4 million funding from them.
Wow.
And they had never invested in a company in Sri Lanka, so they gave the money in 2 tranches. So they were not sure whether we take the $4 million, transfer it to bank account, and disappear. Because how are you going to go get it, right? You come to Sri Lanka. Good luck finding that at that time. Right? So they put $2 million, and they gave $2 million 2 years later. And again, we were like, oh, that's it. We're going to be rich, $4 million. We're profitable. Well, it wasn't that easy. And also we were crazy because we were building 3 products, not just 1. We hadn't even launched 1. We only had
building 3.
We were building 3. Yeah, we're not going to build 1, right? It's a kind of nut job thing to do. But then so then we were running out of money. And then again, we tried to raise money, couldn't raise money at all. Then they gave us a loan, a $2 million loan. And in fact, Pradeep later told me Intel Capital guys had absolutely refused to give the loan. It was called a bridge, right? It's a loan. It's a bridge loan. Bridge to the next round. And the story inside Intel had been, this is a bridge to nowhere. We're going to lose this money because this guys are going to screw it up. So they gave the money, and we managed. So we got this bridge. Then next time we raise some money again, we're going around all over. I have spreadsheets. My story is I have pitched WSO2 to more than 150 investors myself, right? And only 4 have ever said yes, basically. We never had, not with the private equity round. That was a different story. But that was we were much larger, and the story was much bigger and different, right? So even in the 2011, now we are raising money because we knew we were running out of money in 2012. No response. Then we got an inbound mail from a guy called Tyler Jewell. He was the head of corporate investments at Quest Software. And they invested money. They put $4 million, right? And he came to Sri Lanka, and he was also a very deeply technical guy. He loved the technical stuff. He knew we had no idea what we were doing in the products and how to make products and sell it. But we got that money, again corporate money, right? Then later was Cisco, again corporate, because that actually Pradeep knew somebody there, introduced us, and Cisco had a strategic alignment with us. They were trying to build stuff. Then 2013 they tried to buy the company. They offered us $120 million, and I didn't want to sell. It was a massive fight to not sell. And eventually Intel ended up selling Toba, and then Quest had become Toba. Anyway, so they bought the rest of the shares. And and then 2015 we raised some money, and after that our investors said, okay, I'm not going to let you raise any more money, you have to become profitable. In 2015 we raised $15 million, and we had another bridge we converted, and at that time, $10 million and a $5 million bridge we converted. So we were told you had to be profitable. I think that year we were losing about $11 or $12 million we were burning that year. So we had basically 1 year to cut over from losing 11 million to come to zero. Losing zero. So we, it was I hated them obviously at the time, but in hindsight it was the best thing they did. Because they basically taught us how to run the company without wasting money and focusing on very well managed funding investments. And the second part was, the other part they didn't realize was the moment you're cash flow neutral, investors don't have control over you, right? When you got to keep raising money, they got to approve everything. They have full control over you. When you don't need to raise money, you're not going to die because you don't have money, then you have control finally. I never had control as a percentage of the company from day one, right? That was never a factor in this. So it was and then then we became profitable in 2016 onwards. We were cash flow neutral, cash flow positive. I think 2017 onwards we were actually EBITDA profitable, P&L profitable, and in 2021 we raised some money. Our main investor wanted to get some money out of the company, so we raised $90 million from Goldman Sachs in 2021. At the time, that's when the era of valuations are much higher. We got a 10x valuation, so we were $55 million in ARR. We got $550 million pre-money valuation at the time, and then in 22 we were going to try to expand much faster, so we invested a ton of money. I think we burnt like $20 million in cash that year. We hired a lot of people. But of course, 22 was also a dramatic change in the world conditions. All the inflation stuff came on, the Ukraine war started, everything started changing crazily in 22. And so that year was very tough. We grew, but not the level we wanted, so we ended up spending a lot of money. Then by, I think, fourth quarter 22, we had zeroed it out again. We cut off all that money, we just started, and then 23 onwards, again, we were profitable, and we've been profitable ever since.
What a crazy story. Sanjiva, one final question. What is some unfiltered feedback that you received from someone that has really impacted you personally or professionally as an entrepreneur?
So the first board meeting, seed investor said, so when am I getting a real CEO? I'm the founder CEO. First board meeting, 2005, August or September probably, right?
Wow.
I was like, I said, no problem. Because, I remember, let me give the context, right? At that time, the model was founders are not company CEOs. Founders get company started. And at least by the A or B round, you bring an outside person. If you go and look, that was the model. And It was only about 2010 that model stopped saying, look, founder-led companies are good. The founder is not the greatest manager usually. You need to support them. You need to help them with the right people.
Right.
But you don't fire the founder. That's not the right model, right?
Right.
And my answer to James at the meeting was, anytime, as soon as we find somebody better than me to run this company.
Okay.
So I wonder why, but we couldn't find somebody better than me for a while. But anyway, so to me that was a point. Say, look, there's a difference in mindset about being able to create product, being able to inspire people to write code, blah blah blah, to actually being a company. Right. So it was not meant as feedback, but it was feedback for me, saying,
yes,
you gotta stay on your toes. You gotta understand people have put their money, right? They've hard-earned money into this company. If we mess it up, their money's gone. It's not coming back.
Right.
And that's the moral responsibility you take when you take somebody's money as an investment money and actually try to deliver. So
awesome. Sanjiva, thank you so much for your time. It was an amazing conversation. It felt like we were also talking to a historian of software. That's how I would put it, because you have like this huge expanse of experience and information about the last 30 years. Thank you for sharing so openly with us.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. It was fun.